The only thing I'm guilty of is, well, we'll find out soon. Hey y'all, welcome to my channel. I'm Raphael and I am here to review season 2, episode 1 of The Real Twinks of Salt Lake City. So we start the season off with a scene that looks like the opening of a Friday the 13th movie because it was so creepy. I mean, the music was creepy, the tension was creepy. We kind of got a look behind the scene of how it looks to film on the show. And we see all the women from season 1, they're all getting onto this bus and we see Jen and she gets a phone call from somebody and she's like, babe, okay, I'm leaving now. And then next thing you know, she leaves into this truck and then she goes and then it says 12 minutes later and then the police arrive. This whole huge fiasco. Everybody's like, where's Jen Shah? Where is she? And then they're at her house. A helicopter's up there. Batman is swinging. Spider-Man came to fight Doc Ock. I mean, it was crazy. The whole scene was so dramatic. I'm like, wow. For season 2, and this is how we're starting? I'm like, damn. But that was just the preview of what's to come later on in the season because then we flash back to 2 months ago. Then we start off at Jen's house, her new house. Her house looks so beautiful. I'm like, wow, this is a really, really upgrade from her old house. I'm like, let me see how you paid for it, Jen. I just want to just show me the receipts really quickly. And then we get Lisa at the door. And I know it's season 2 and I still do not know who is Lisa or who is Meredith. Like, they both look so much alike. At this point, I need one of them to dye their hair blonde. I need one of them to dye their hair red or get a bob cut or do something, something completely different because I cannot tell who is who, especially when both of them are in the same room talking to each other. It's like that Spider-Man meme where the Spider-Man is pointing at the other Spider-Man. That's exactly what I see when I see Lisa and Meredith together, or let alone one of them individually. So we have Lisa, and Lisa shows up at Jen's house, and Jen and her, they're sitting down in her new living room. Again, the house is so beautiful. It's so nice. And it's crazy too because they all live in snow weather like all the time. That's exactly why I decided to take out my fur coat, because it's gonna be a chilly, season. It's snowy. And so they start sitting down and then Jen reveals to Lisa that, 6 months ago that her and Sharif, Coach, her husband, almost got a divorce, which honestly, it did not surprise me at all because I kind of called it the first season. I'm like, I don't know, the way Jen is behaving and Coach, he just seems like such a good husband. Like, he seems like such a good man. And I don't understand how he will put up with her a little bit more, especially with her antics. I mean, always, going off every 5 seconds on everybody, having these temper tantrums. And I could kind of see how, he would kind of get sick of it. And it's kind of a shame that he actually blamed himself, like, oh, I'm not really contributing anything. I'm not really helping you. I mean, I guess to a certain extent, it might be true, but you were being a good husband. You were trying to be there for her. And I just really do think that it was just the whole thing with, the death in the family and Jen's family, like, that she was dealing with, that she really couldn't, film for the show correctly. I feel like that was also playing on her emotions, and then the friend dynamic. It was just all too much for her on TV. And her friendship with Meredith is still on the rocks, especially after the reunion. We never really got any type of closure like that. So, Lisa brings it up. It's like, look, I'm still friends with Meredith, and I just don't want you killing anybody in the middle, which is her. And then Jen, I'm like, woo, she's about to get the Erica Jane treatment. Because she's like, oh, it's okay. I will go to jail for you. I will go to jail for anybody. I haven't gone to jail yet. And I'm like, yikes. Is this like a premonition to the future? I'm like, damn, Jen. I'm like, all right, let's see how this goes. So then we head over to Meredith's house where she's putting a sweater on her dog. And then she gets a knock at the door. And it's Heather. And Heather comes in. And, I always had my side eye about Heather. I don't know, it's just something about Heather. I don't know what it is, but it's just something there, and they're talking, they're having a conversation, and she's Meredith is explaining her marriage again, because last season, she, it kind of seemed that her and Seth were kind of heading into divorce, sort of. I don't know, to me, it always gave me the vibe of that Meredith was maybe cheating on Seth or something like that. That Seth was like really 100%, into the relationship. But I feel like Meredith had already kind of like checked out already. She was like, yeah, I don't really feel like being in this. I'm going to go screw the ski lift guys. So, well, goodbye. That's just the vibe I got. Even now, I still get the vibe because Heather's like, so is everything good now? How's everything going now? And Meredith's like, yeah, everything is, it's good. It's good. And I'm like, are you trying to convince Heather, us, or yourself? Like, what is going on here? I don't know. I need to see her and her husband interacting in a scene to see how it really is going down. Because, again, the other vibe that I also got the first season was that they were just kind of playing up this, relationship that they seemed that they were gonna go divorcing, but they're not gonna get a divorce because it's just a storyline, for TV. I feel like that's what they were kind of doing. So I don't know. I don't really buy the marriage between her and Zev yet. Maybe we have to give it some time. And then Heather's also like, yeah, me and my daughter, is my specific daughter that's going to college, she still doesn't know whether she's going to California or not. I thought she was gonna go to Bring BYOB or something like that. I'm like, wait, aren't those the abbreviation to bring your own bottle to a party? I'm like, BYO what? And she's like, yeah, because that's where, you find your eternal soulmate and you just live happily ever after. I'm like, what school is this? Is this the school of Disney or something? Like, that's where you find Prince Charming? And she was like, no, I just want her to go to a real college, have all the experience that I never had, just really live out there. And I'm like, Heather, what are you really trying to get her to do? Like, that sounds kind of like, I want her to have 3 one-night stands in 1 week. I want her to do the walk of shame. I want her to get blacked out drunk. I want her to go into school going like, that she just threw up 5 seconds ago. I want her going into class like that. I just want her to experience everything that I didn't. That's basically what Heather was saying. Then we head over to Whitney's house and she's in the kitchen with her husband and her son. And I completely forgot about, the relationship between her husband and the age gap and how they really met. He's like double her age, and the way they met was kind of scandalous. It was kind of, scandalous behind the scenes. And then I'm like, okay, I didn't really notice the age difference until the Red Hot Chili Peppers walked in. Because I'm like, who are these 3 men walking in here? Are they about to rob the place? Like, what's going on? But no, they're his stepson. And I'm like, okay, so they're here for the birthday celebration. And it's so interesting how, Whitney's 34 and she's closer in age to the stepson. I mean, they're 28, 30, or 29. And I'm like, well, that's an interesting dynamic. I mean, you're closer in age to your stepchildren than you are to your husband. I don't know, like, that's just, I mean, it's interesting. And she's telling them like, oh yeah, I'm trying to rebrand my skincare because I don't really have good skin, and now I'm gonna call it Wild Rose. And they're just there to take shots and celebrate the birthday, and they just continue down in shots. I'm like, in front of that child, and he's just, he's just sitting there. I'm like, if you don't go upstairs and play PlayStation, what are you doing down here in, grown people's business? Go upstairs. But then the party gets moved over outside in the pool, and it's just a bunch of foam, a bunch of bubbles, and I kind of wonder, since they're in the middle of snow, how does that work? I mean, do they have something outside of the pool to, heat them in? Because I would assume if you go inside the water and you come out, you're probably like freezing or shivering or something, because you're around snow, but maybe it's certain temperature water or whatever. But it looks fun regardless. Whitney's back inside. She's trying to, get a cake outside with a bunch of candles. She's picking it up and she drops it. I'm like, oh. I was surprised that the whole house didn't light on fire because they had like 8 candles on top of it that were lit up. And I'm like, okay, just leave that there and go outside, Whitney. Just sweep it up later. And then she picks it up instead and she's like, no, I'm going to make this work. And then she drops again. I'm like, oh no, instead of a skincare company, you need to be working on a cake company. Like, what is this? And she just keeps picking it up and playing with it. I'm like, what are we doing? I thought she was about to make out with it in a second. And she takes it outside. She's like, anybody want a cake? And she just gives it to the dog instead. I'm like, I know that as soon as the cameras were done filming, she probably picked it up and they probably all ate it. I could see it happening. So then we head over to Mary, and she's finally not in her closet. She's on her way over to film a podcast, and I just feel like I needed some holy water, drenched all over me after watching this scene. I'm like, okay, like it's getting weird. I'm like, all right, it was nice to see Mary again. She's a very interesting character, but as they were recording the podcast, the first guy in the middle, her friend, was just getting way too excited and way too into it and, preaching about Jesus, this, that, and the third. And Mary's like, okay, you need to calm it down now. Calm it down. This is Bravo, and he's not going to like this. You need to calm it down a little bit. And then Mary started taking over, and she's just, I don't know, especially after all the videos, the footage, not the footage, the audio that leaked of her and the way she treats the people at the church. I'm like, how can anybody follow her or like listen to her? I don't know. I just feel like you must have like no type of common sense or no type of brain yourself to be listening to anything that Mary, is preaching about. Because when she preaches, it's just like, I don't know. It just sounds like it's almost like she's judging you, and as if she's like ashamed of you and like, you need to give me your money now or you peasant. That's the way I see it as. I'm like, okay. And she's like, I am a child of God. I'm a vessel of God. one thing I am gonna do is be a vessel for God. And I'm like, okay, Mary, like, relax. Nobody's saying that you're not. And she's like, I don't trust people. I don't really like people. Nobody's gonna tell me what to do. Nobody's gonna tell me what to say. And I'm like, okay, so why should anybody be listening to what you have to say then? I don't know. The whole thing was giving me very much cult vibes. I don't know. It was giving me very much American Horror Story cult. Like, I don't know. It was just very, very strange. Like, Mary's cool on the show. She has her moments, but when she gets very, very preachy like this, I'm like, ugh, I don't know. It's just something about it. It's like, I wouldn't be heading over to your church, especially, what did she call it? She called it the butcher's church or something like that. I'm like, no, I'm not going over there to get butchered. I'm not going over there to give you my money. Like, no, 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 no. I also wonder is, how is her relationship with her son? How does her son see her, and how does he see the whole relationship between her and, the granddaddy husband? Like, it's always such an interesting dynamic, and I want to see what his perspective on it is. Like, does he think that his mom is too much or too preachy? Like, does she come at him like for, being too much on social media, for all about money? She's telling us too that she's like, well, I want him to be independent because I'm not going to be there forever, supporting him. I'm not doing that. And I'm like, but Mary, aren't you also being supported, because you married your granddaddy husband? Like, that's the only reason you have money. So, I don't know. It's a very interesting dynamic. That's all I can say about it. Then we get introduced to the new housewife of the show, and her name is Jenny, and she's being introduced through Lisa. Lisa's her friend, and they've been longtime friends for years. They met when they were pregnant. Apparently, they bumped into each other with their stomachs, and they've been besties since then. And Jenny seems cool so far. It's her first episode, so let's see what she's about to give. What do y'all think from the first impression that we got this episode? What do y'all think about Jenny so far? Do y'all think she's a good fit? I think she's okay so far. And, they're talking. We get a backstory of how she is. And Lisa also is like, oh, Jenny, tell, my son Jack how, what happened with you and Vietnamese. How did you escape? And she's like, yeah, I escaped Vietnamese through a boat. So her and her family got sponsored by a Christian church, and they ended up in California. But to go to kindergarten, she had to change her legal age. Well, her dad did it. Her dad changed it to 2 years younger just so she could meet the requirement. So on paper, Jenny's age is not really real as opposed to what her real life age is. On paper, it says something completely different. And then we get more backstory to her and her husband and how they met. He's kind of like a doctor for your body. And she's like, yeah, when I first met him, from his neck down, he had a really good body. But from his neck up, he wasn't really the cutest. I'm like, damn, if I was her husband watching this episode, I think we will have an issue. And it's kind of cool that she met him through her sister-in-law because she was doing her makeup at a photo shoot. And then she's like, you know what? I'm going to set you up on a blind date with my brother. And then boom, they've been together for 14 years. And he's a chiropractor. That's really, really cool. I was like, well, okay. So let's see how their marriage is. So then Jenny's husband proceeds to take Jack and all her children, and they go downstairs, and then he lays him on this bed so he could crack his back and, readjust his ribs. And I'm like, oh, that was too much cracking, snapping, and popping for me. It sounded like they were making the movie The Grudge. All I was waiting for was somebody to be like, with all the cracking and everything that was going on. I'm like, oh, it just seems like so painful. He's like, okay, I'm gonna get to it now. Are you ready? I'm gonna push you down. And then he just folded him into a sandwich. He folded him into a triangle, and then he bounced him and then threw him in a bucket. I'm like, that was too much for me. And meanwhile, Lisa and Jenny are just upstairs having a conversation like, yeah, we're like rich and we don't want to give it to our children, right? Like, they need to work for it. Then back at Jen's house, they're having kind of like a mini family reunion, specifically for Sharif Jr.'s 27th birthday, or at least that's the excuse that Jen is putting, because, it's an excuse to get everybody together, so why not celebrate it together? And then we finally get to see Jen's Aunt Nani, and we see her with the little chair that she needs to walk, and we see her with the prosthetic legs, and she's like, see, this is finally the hospital smell that everybody kept criticizing me for last season, and specifically, Mary. Mary kept bringing up the whole hospital smell. She's like, this is the reason why, but now she smells like expensive Louis Vuitton perfume. I'm like, okay, Dorit. As the family is bonding and talking, Jen tells us that, the relationship between her and her husband, almost divorced, and really had a huge impact on the family because they're technically the backbone, and if they're not right, then the whole family is not right. And I'm like, that's a lot of pressure to have. I mean, on a family. I mean, you're your own person. Me and your husband. Like, if I was Jen, I'll be like, okay, me and my husband are me and my husband. You have your own issues, and if we're falling apart, you can't fall apart either. I get it that we're family, but we have to have some type of boundary. I just feel like that was way too much. I'm like, what? So if you and your husband just divorced, does everybody else in the family just fall apart too and can no longer live and move on? Like, what happens then? And we see Jen's mom is also there, and she gives a small toast, saying that she wishes that the grandfather could be there and Jen's father could be there. They will appreciate that. It was a cute little moment. And then we get the first group gathering of the season between Mary, Heather, Whitney, and Meredith. And by the way, I do like Whitney's hairstyle. The new hairstyle that she has this season is kind of like a bob cut or a shorter cut. I do like it. It looks cute. Same thing for Meredith. Meredith's hair looks nice. And they're all talking. They're in this igloo. They're ordering food. And then Meredith, she gets a little sad. And they're like, what's going on? What's happening? And Meredith's like, well, my dad passed away. And it was so sad. She cried a little bit, and they kind of did a small prayer for him. It was really sad. She was like, I kind of lost him emotionally because he had dementia, but then I lost him physically. And it must be really, really, really devastating. It's so sad. It was nice to see Mary, comfort her. And she could relate because at the reunion, remember when she told Heather that her father had also passed away? So she knows what that pain feels like. So I'm glad that she was there to comfort Meredith. And it was also nice to see Mary, finally in a group setting, in a group gathering. I'm like, is this the first one that we've ever seen in a while? I mean, season 1, she was in the closet 24/7. So it was really nice to see her outside, even if she was in an igloo. I was like, oh, okay, Mary. So, you can get along with a woman. And as they're talking, Meredith is like, I feel some type of way about Jen. She has made very homophobic comments about Brooks. Brooks, I'm not sure if he's the friend of the Housewives this season or if he's the newest housewife, because he wants a snowflake so bad ever since season 1. I'm like, can you just go to your room and work on your, clothes or something? She's telling them that Jen has been liking certain tweets and posts and commenting on certain things about Brooks. And then she said, yeah, she called my son a twink, and I couldn't help but... I'm like, that's not funny, but... I'm like, stop it. Like, just hearing that word twink, I'm like, what? But I can see why Meredith would not like those comments, especially after she's like, well, Brooks never really talked to me about his sexuality. He's still young and he's still trying to figure it out. So it's just like, who is Jen to tell me what my son is, or, to be putting this on social media? So I could completely understand what she's saying, because Jen, I don't know, it's just, you have a way of saying certain things, and the way she was talking about Brooks in these comments, and then when they show the receipts on the screen, I'm like, it's not looking good for you. I don't know. And my question is, so is Jen gonna have a one-on-one sit down with Brooks, or like, I can't see them going out to dinner like, so I want to talk about, you calling me a twink, what's going on? And then boom, throws a drink. Like, I can't picture both of them just sitting down. Like, I need Meredith to be there, to initiate the whole conversation, because I'm assuming that she doesn't want the apologies for her. She wants it for her son. So then we head back over to Meredith's house, where she's cooking something with Seth, her husband, and Brooks, her son. And I'm like, okay, we have the family together. And you could just tell that Meredith is just not in the right headspace, and rightfully so. After her father's death, I mean, you need some time off, and it's unfortunate that she has to kind of film that on TV, but it is what it is, and she's trying her best to get through it. She's coming off cold, but I feel like she just needs a moment, and Lisa's coming over. Lisa comes over, her family, her husband, her child, and eventually Lisa and Meredith sit down to have a conversation, and I'm like, oh, my goodness, I have to like really focus on who is who, because again, just like I said earlier, I don't know who is who when they're both talking to each other. I'm like, okay, who is Lisa again? I'm like, Meredith is which one? Raise your hand if you're Meredith. Like, I'm so confused in their scenes, but this time I actually kind of understood it. I'm like, okay, we're at Meredith's house and Lisa's the guest, so that's how I know. And they're talking, and Meredith is telling Lisa, like, okay, I just feel some type of way about the whole comments that Jen has been making about Brooks. And again, just like I said, it's rightfully so. It is borderline homophobia in a way. Even though Brooks may have been annoying on season 1, that still gives Jen no right to say or like any comment or status or comment on anything on social media, you know, because again, just like Meredith said, if Meredith was to do that to Sharif Jr. or to anybody in Jen's family, Jen would, you know, she would lose it and she would be like, why are you talking about my family? Why are you talking about my family? I know that would be the first thing that Jen would do. So I can see what Meredith is trying to say. Lisa, she's trying to, you know, play the judge in the middle. And she's like, look, the same situation that I'm having with Heather is kind of the same situation that you're and Jen in. And Meredith is like, no, I'm having a whole different situation. You and Heather are just some petty BS. You know, like, oh, you don't know each other in college, or you're pretending that you don't know each other. That's a whole different situation. And then when Meredith asked Lisa, so would you still talk to Jen if she says something about your child? Like, what would you do? And Lisa just couldn't answer. She's like, anyways, this is not about me. That's basically what she was saying. She couldn't really muster up a answer for that. I'm like, okay, Lisa, let's see where this goes. And I understand Lisa, you know, if you're friends with Jen, the other friendship shouldn't really, you know, affect your friendship with her, but you're kind of in the middle here. Lisa just wants peace between Jen and Meredith. She just kind of wants them to sit down and kind of hash out everything together. But Meredith, again, she's just not in the right headspace. Meredith is just like, yeah, I don't know. It's been 2 years. I don't know if I could really forgive her. I don't know if an apology will even do it at this point. And at this point, I'm like, will an apology? Like, if Jen was to be like, oh, I'm sorry for everything I said, or for the comments about Brooks, would Meredith actually, you know, take the bait? Would she actually be okay with it? She feels that Jen is just not going to do that, because the minute Jen feels like attacked or somebody's telling her something that she doesn't want to hear, her wall goes all the way up. And I could agree, because Jen gets very defensive. You know, she gets very snappy right away if somebody says something to her that she doesn't like. So I'm not sure how this sit down is gonna go. And you know, maybe Brooks was the one that told the cops where she was at the beginning of the scene. Eventually, Lisa and Meredith leave the conversation off like that. They get up, they go back into the kitchen, they go around the kitchen table with their family, they do a speech and they do a toast, and they end the night off just like that. And that was that, y'all. That was the episode. What did y'all think about the season 2 opening episode? I mean, it was kind of slow. It was kind of dry, especially for all the snow in the background. It was a little too dry for me, but I can see what they're doing. They're setting up the stage for later on with Jen and the police and the helicopters. And, you know, we're just getting a reintroduction to everybody's marriage, everybody's character. You know, we got the new housewife, Jenny. What did y'all think about her? Hopefully, episode 2 and so on, you know, moves a little bit faster, because we cannot have a season this slow. And then by like episode 10, that's when we're going to see the whole Jen fiasco. You know, no, we need that by episode 4. But that's that, y'all. Let me know what y'all thought about this episode. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. And you can also follow me on Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok. Bye, y'all. Mwah.